you know, kind of corporate America, it would suck to find out that you were getting fired or laid off or whatever in the paper, or I guess more aptly, on Twitter or X or whatever the case may be. I definitely think like that does sting. Um,
So today, Trump introduced his new Trump Gold Card. It is a crazy thing. This is open corruption. He was also asked about Russian connections. Let's just jump right in. So the first question was, "Hey Trump, which Russian oligarchs do you know?" Have a listen to this.
Elaborate a bit more on what Russian oligarchs you know
I
or
know.
don't
Isn't it interesting how many stories we do tell? And they all turn out to be true, and they all turn out to be ultimately correct. Trump was right about everything. Do you have one of those Trump was right about everything hats? I'm going to give it to this gentleman. Get me one of them. They're all going to be bad.
So it's kind of a weird thing. They're asking about oligarchs, and then he just started talking about, "Hey, get one of these hats. Get one of these hats." It's like, what? It's a way for him to dodge the question, as you see. And basically, what's going on, and we're going to talk about the Trump Gold Card thing, is a way for them to make money. Essentially, they're selling green cards. They're calling them gold cards. Have a listen to this thing, and again, I want you to see how he dodged the question on which Russian oligarchs do you know by starting talking about hats instead. So let's talk about this Trump Gold Card thing. See what he has to say, and I'll meet you on the other side.
Everybody knows I ran on downsizing government, but making government better. I ran on tariffs and making our country rich, and that's what it's going to do. Uh, we're going to be doing something else that's going to be very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. And we think it's going to be extremely successful. It's never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say 2 weeks out? Do you want to say a couple of words about it?
So, guys, yes, we're talking about Trump Gold Card. So this idea isn't that unusual in the sense that, sure, many companies actually do offer, if you invest in a country, you can get residency. That is a thing. But not necessarily in the way that Trump does it, where, hey, it's $5 million, this is the pathway, and they keep promising we're going to vet people, etc. We'll ask them. That's why I mentioned the Russian oligarch thing first, because one of the questions you'll see eventually is, hey, can Russian oligarchs get this thing? So, I mean, it's just kind of obvious where this is going, right? If you're Trump and you like want to invite your Russian, buddies to come into the country, and he's, from Trump's point of view, he's saying, hey, they're going to create jobs or whatever. I'll just say this: there is definitely a lot of fraud in this kind of system. They address that as well, that question, but I'll say Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, that's the one married to Ivanka, his company was charged with fraud with this kind of stuff. It was the EB5 program. So there's been questions about that. Trump, take a look at what him and Melania, they brought in Melania with the Einstein visa, which clearly she's not an Einstein. But this is, it's nothing shocking here. But what I just want you guys to see it, with your own eyes, because sometimes people actually don't believe that Trump's a mafia slash gangster boss, and they don't believe the whole Russian connection stuff. Where essentially the first question was he dodges it. He'll go more into this stuff, and also you want to hear one of his underlings talk about the Trump mafia card. So, or Trump, sorry, Trump gold card, which could potentially bring in his mafia buddies. So have a listen to this.
So the EB5 program um, was really you lend some money, but it was full of nonsense, make believe, and fraud, and it was a way to get a green card that was low priced. So the president said, rather than having this sort of ridiculous EB5 program, we're going to end the EB5 program. We're going to replace it with the Trump Gold Card, which is really a one card gold, so they'll be able to pay $5 million to the U.S. government. I will bet you.
So yes, guys, they really said Trump gold card. That's actually what they're going to call this thing. And the basic idea of the original program, EB5, again, this isn't necessarily unusual to the USA. Trump always says everything he does is never thought of before, but the basic idea is, hey, how can we attract foreign investment, create jobs, etc. Investments say like $1 million, create at least 10 jobs, that kind of stuff. But there's certainly be fraud in this stuff and proving it. Is your company real or is it just some sort of shell company for money laundering? Now, in the Trump point of view, they're up in the ante to 5 million. I think probably you up it to the 6 million and then 1 million disappears. That's how the money laundering is going to work. I know I laugh about this stuff, but it is open corruption. And it's funny when you hear one of his underlings talk. I mean, don't they sound like mob bosses to you? And have to listen some more. Again, they're talking about the Trump gold card to buy your way into the country. And chances are, it's going to be a Russian oligarch and things like that. So, have listen some more.
We're just going to make sure they're wonderful world-class citizens. They can come to America, President card, and they can invest in America, and we can use that money, reduce our deficit. Why do we give out lotteries of green cards? Why do we give out EB5 of green cards? The President of the United States understands that the right answer is why don't we eliminate the deficit of the United States of America instead? The gold card, well, millions, but the gold card will bring in with it people that create jobs.
Right. So again, and it may not just be Russian people he wants to bring in. You may have Saudi friends, you may have Chinese friends, whatever. It's just what it is, right? I mean, this is sort of what they're going for. And again, I'll say again, this isn't necessarily unusual to countries.
All right, President Trump's promise to stop the migrant flow isn't exclusive to the southern border. Border czar Tom Homan will be meeting with the Border Security Caucus today to lay out how the administration will be securing the northern border with Canada. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney sits on that caucus and joins me now to preview her meeting with the border czar. Congresswoman, good morning to you. So what should viewers know about the concerns you have regarding the northern border ahead of your conversation with Tom Homan later today?
Well, great to see you, Carly. I first visited the northern border when I got most of the northern border of New York and New York 24, which stretches all the way from the St. Lawrence Seaway all the way to the Niagara River, where we've seen almost an increase of 90%. Or actually 90% of the people on the terror watch list have come across the northern border, and that's even going beyond the border with Canada and my region. But we also have seen this huge increase in illegal immigrants just coming into the New York State because of the policies of Kathy Hochul and the Democrats who run everything in Albany. And Tom Homan has been shining a light on that. That's why we created the Northern Border Security Caucus. I visited the southern border back in 2021 and saw the problems there, and a lot of this has been shifted northward because the cartels can take control of the northern border because of the weak, feckless policies of the governor of the New York State and the legislature, who have passed laws, by the way, one passed by Governor Cuomo in 2019 called the Green Light Law, that prohibits our police from working with ICE to find dangerous criminals, which is, if you watch any of the clips of Tom Homan, he is focusing on dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, the worst of the worst, the people who have abducted and taken children, they're human trafficking, they're bringing illicit drugs across our border. This is really important because not only are they putting New Yorkers at risk, they're putting the entire country at risk, and we have to secure the border, which I'm looking so forward to meeting with Tom Homan today, who, by the way, hails from my district. He's from the northern border region. He's from Jefferson County, where one of the counties I represent.
Okay, so Congresswoman, last night Republicans got together and did something that many thought couldn't be done, and they passed the one big beautiful bill out of the House and now heads to the Senate. This, of course, includes a lot of the things that Donald Trump campaigned on, like extending the tax cuts and funding for border security. So now that it has passed by a very slim majority, what should Republicans know about this bill and how could it impact their lives?
Yeah, well, Carly, first of all, this is our budget top-line numbers, so this is going to go to the Senate, and we're going to see what the Senate sends back to us. But this actually sets forth, with arduous work and a lot of negotiations, getting to a point where we could have everyone on our entire caucus join here in making sure that we keep Trump's tax cuts permanent. Those tax cuts, if they expire, and I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, could pay a $4.5 trillion tax increase, mostly to play.
Looks like 10 pounds of death in a 5-pound bag.
You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up 500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they repossess your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on. I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness. Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Well, we had a very interesting day, to say the least, in the financial markets. I don't know if it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not sure what good there was, but there were a lot of things to be concerned about. I'm going to start off with the market that rallied, so I guess that's the good if you happen to be long, and that is U.S. Treasuries. We saw a pretty big rally in the long end of the Treasury market today. Now, I don't think this is going to last. I am still bearish the long end of the curve, despite the rally that we've seen today. Part of that was the result of some increased optimism on another rate cut. So the markets are now expecting more rate cuts from the Fed. But what is prompting this optimism about the rate cuts and rally in bonds and drop in bond yield is pessimism on the U.S. economy. And I have been talking about this and forecasting this for quite some time on the program. On my podcast I did on Sunday night, I went over all of the stagflationary data that came out last week. Well, we've already got more of that confirmation stagflation data that came out this week. Yesterday, we got the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Survey, which in January was actually a positive 14.1, and it collapsed to a negative 8.3. That is a big drop. The production index went from 12.2 down to negative 9.1. But the news that came out today, I think, was even more worrisome for the markets, and that was February consumer confidence, which collapsed. They were expecting 103 from an upwardly revised 105.3 in January, making the decline to 98.3 that much bigger. It's the biggest decline in this survey in over 3 years. So a big drop. And the main reason for the loss of confidence is inflation and concerns over rising inflation. In fact, the expectation for 12-month inflation, so over the next year, rose from the prior month 5.2%, which was already a high number, all the way up to 6%. So the public is expecting 6% inflation. Meanwhile, Powell is still claiming that expectations are well anchored at 2%. Whose expectations is he referring to when the surveys are showing that consumer expectations is 3 times as high, 6%? Also, the number of people who are expecting a recession to begin this year rose to now a 9-month high. So people are more concerned about the economy. They're more worried about inflation. Also, Trump is continuing to beat the tariff drum, talking about how the tariffs with Mexico and Canada, they're still on, right? They're coming in April. Maybe we're going to have tax and tariffs on Europe. So all of this weighing on confidence, weighing on the economy, raising the prospect of recession, which again, I think we've been in a recession the entire time. Oil prices also moving lower. Again, I don't expect this to stay. I think oil is going to reverse. But oil down below $70 a barrel, $69 a barrel. the reason we're seeing this downward pressure on oil, and it's coming even as the U.S. dollar is drifting lower. It's not collapsing, but the dollar index fell again today. We're down near the lows of the year. We're barely holding on to a 106 handle on the dollar index, 106.23. But the drop in oil prices is due to the fears of a economic slowdown, and that is what is prompting the rally in bonds. But what bond investors are overlooking as they're buying bonds is the strength in inflation, because inflation erodes away the value of the bonds they're buying. And so they're just focusing on the weakness in the economy, and that's kind of a reflexive move, probably a pre-programmed algorithm to, buy bonds because look at all this weak economic data. But the weak economic data is actually inflationary in that it's going to mean bigger budget deficits and a weaker dollar, which is going to push consumer prices higher. Again, this is stagflation, right? This is not the type of economic weakness that any of the people who are trading today or who are programming algorithms to trade have experienced. You have to go back to the 1970s to see economic conditions that are comparable, although they're worse now because the financial position of the United States has deteriorated dramatically since that decade. But you have to go back then, and recession doesn't guarantee lower yield. In fact, I think it assures higher yields, and that's why I'm confident that the rally in bonds is going to reverse, and that's going to be even more problematic for the stock market. But the stock market is already having a problem with this dynamic because the air is coming out of the bubble of a lot of the momentum names, right? The speculative stocks that have been bid way up based on the cheap money bubble and the good times rolling. A lot of these stocks are getting hit. But the risk asset that got hit the hardest today, and the one I want to start the podcast really talking about, is Bitcoin. And not just Bitcoin, it's the entire crypto ecosystem, industry, whatever you want to call it. And I talked about this, in the euphoria of the Trump victory, as Bitcoin surged to 109,000 and all things crypto went up. I was saying at the time that maybe this is the euphoric top, that everybody is so optimistic. There's absolutely no reason for Bitcoin to go down. We've got a crypto president. We got a crypto cabinet. We're going to have a strategic reserve. Everybody was bullish. Nobody wanted to sell. And I said, that's the exact environment where you probably should sell. If you can't think of a reason to sell, you probably should, because everybody else was buying and we had a blow off top. Bitcoin today officially entered what Wall Street would call a bear market. Earlier today, Bitcoin traded below 86,000. That was a 21% decline from the 109,000 peak from November. So that meets the definition of a bear market. But Bitcoin is actually doing the best. Look at Ethereum. Ether's down 40% since December. That's doing worse. Now, one of the reasons that it was running into some problems was competition from Solana. Well, Solana was down 55% from its peak last month. And what really drove Solana up was all the mania about meme coins when people bought Trump coin and Melania coin. By the way, Trump coin is down 80% already. Of course, it's going to go down 100%. I mean, all this crap is worthless, but it is falling apart. But it's not just the tokens. Look at the individual crypto stocks. I mean, talk about bear markets. The mining companies are just getting killed. I mean, you can pretty much pick any one of these miners. They're at 52-week lows or multi-year lows, or they're at the lowest they've ever been, like in their history of being a public company. I mean, if this is the age of crypto, we have a crypto president, and everything's going to be great for crypto, why are these miners getting completely destroyed, right? I mean, look at like Hive blockchain or digital technologies. That closed at $2.18. That's a multi-year low. The 52-week high was almost $6 on that stock. This other one here, just had a few of them. Oh, Mara Holdings. They recently started as Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, which is way underwater now. Where they were down at 8% today, but they're at $12.40, down from $34. Was the 52-week high. Some of these stocks I haven't heard of. Cleans Park. It's a miner. It closed down like 8.5%, 8.15. The 52-week high was $24.72. Here, Argo Blockchain. This thing is down at 44 cents. The 52-week high was $2.78. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these stocks. You can just look them up and see how much they just crashed. But of course, the poster boy for the Bitcoin space is MicroStrategy, although it's not micro anymore, although it's going to be micro pretty soon as far as its stock price, but it's now just called strategy. But the real strategy is how to bankrupt your company, because that's the strategy that Michael Saylor is pursuing. So strategy was down 10% about on the day, although at the lows it was down closer to 13%, but there was a little bit of a rally. But strategy closed 54% below its November high. 54%. This is a brutal bear market. But even worse, because of all the massive dilution, because of all the stock they've issued since then to buy Bitcoin, the premium has collapsed. At one point, at its peak, a MicroStrategy was almost triple the value of its Bitcoin. I mean, maybe 270% premium. But for most of its history, it was at like a double. Like you were paying twice as much to buy MicroStrategy as the value of their Bitcoin. Now, the value of the underlying business, whatever software company is buried beneath this, pile of losses, who cares? No one even cares that they're a software. They have to spin the software business off. But it was all trading off of Bitcoin. It was like a closed-end Bitcoin fund that it was trading for double the NAV. Well, now the premium is already down to about 18%. That's it. So it's like a 93% decline in premium. In fact, to add insult to injury, yesterday, Michael Saylor announced on X that they had just bought, MicroStrategy had just spent another $2 billion buying more Bitcoin, right? They borrowed the money, they spent $2 billion on Bitcoin. They didn't buy $2 billion worth of Bitcoin because it's not worth anything, but they blew $2 billion. Their average price on the ones they just bought was $97,500. As I'm recording this podcast now, it's barely $88,000. So they're already down like 10% on the buy that they just announced yesterday. Now, the average price of the Bitcoin that they bought is now $66,357. I mean, their average price and the market price are converging pretty quickly. And because we know he's going to keep on buying, at some point, his average price is going to be above the market price, and it's going to be at a loss. But, you got to think about this. Where would Bitcoin be today had Michael Saylor not just bought another $2 billion worth of it? I mean, he is the biggest buyer. I mean, they've now spent $33 billion buying Bitcoin, most of it in the last couple of months. Yet Bitcoin is at a 3-month low, despite all this buying. So all of these Bitcoin holders have got to ask themselves, who's selling, right? Because somebody is selling their Bitcoin. And it's not the holders who have been conned to never sell their Bitcoin and just go down with the ship. Somebody is selling Bitcoin. And gold was down today. Right? Gold was down at one point. It was down like $60. But so what? I mean, I don't even know if it barely got below 2,900. And in fact, it's back above that right now. Big gold is trading at 29.27. It's up about $12 in the evening. It was down about, by the close, maybe $35, $40. gold's now got support at 2,900. That's basically it. The support level, in case you haven't noticed, keeps on going up for gold. And now it's like 2,900. So if you get a break below 2,900, you're getting a bargain. And soon, 3,000 is going to be the support. But gold is no more than 2%, less than 2% from its all-time record high, and Bitcoin is in a bear market 20% below its record high. I mean, what does that tell you? And also, Bitcoin is lower today, priced in gold, than it was at its peak in 2021. I talked about that a lot on this podcast, that even though Bitcoin was making nominal new highs in dollars, that it hadn't made a new high in gold. And I said on this podcast, I thought there was a good chance that the high was in, that Bitcoin would never see a new high in terms of gold. I think the only reason that that was wrong was because Trump won. Had Trump not won the election, there's no way Bitcoin ever would have seen 100,000. Right? So I think that the high would have been in. But even though Trump was elected, and even though we went to 100,000, 109,000, today Bitcoin is lower by about 10% than it was back in 2021, because Bitcoin is only worth about 30 ounces of gold. When I say only, that's still a big number. Right? It's ridiculous that you can even buy 1 ounce, that you can buy anything with Bitcoin, but you can get 30 ounces of gold. But in November of 2021, you can get 34 ounces. So it's down by 10%. And so Bitcoin has broken back down. It was a false breakout in terms of gold. And again, the only thing I think that really got the hype up there was all the talk about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which I've said is never going to happen because Trump's not going to enact it on his own. I don't think it's legal. Congress is never going to pass it. It was all just a bunch of hype to get people to buy so the whales could sell, because there's some big selling going on that was able to overcome all of the buying from MicroStrategy. And not just MicroStrategy. There's a handful of other companies that followed that ridiculous playbook of Michael Saylor that also have been buying hundreds of millions or billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and putting it on their corporate balance sheets. But despite